I often find myself wondering what people see in me. Is it because I'm attractive? Is it because I'm funny? Is it because I was ahead of my time by about 3 years? Is it because despite all these really cool things about me, I'm a failure and will never amount to anything because my time to shine was long ago? No, it's just because I have all these things in common with the Dreamcast. Look at this thing. It tried, and this thing tried even harder, and that didn't get it anywhere. I'm 23 years old. This may seem like random information I'm providing, but I promise it's important. The Dreamcast was released in 1998 on November 27th. I was born in March of 1999. When I was 2 years old, the Dreamcast officially was discontinued on March 31st of 2001. The Dreamcast was only 3 years old when it was officially discontinued and forgotten to history. Meaning that before I could even comprehend concepts like water displacement, the Dreamcast came and went, and I was none the wiser. I only found out what a Dreamcast was when I was about 7 or 8 when I went to a friend's house and they showed me this weird fucking thing. And I'm gonna be honest, I kind of love this weird fucking thing. I've only had it for a few months, and I really think this thing deserves success. At least more than it got. This thing was seriously ahead of the curve when it released in 1998, and even ahead of the consoles it preceded by 3 years. And in some ways, it's still ahead of its time compared to the technology of today. So initially I bought this thing because I'm just a nerd and just wanted to play the original Sonic Adventure on its original hardware, because I grew up with Sonic Adventure on the GameCube, which everyone with half a brain will say is an inferior port and has progressively gotten worse throughout the years, to which the most accessible version of Sonic Adventure today is a far cry from what it originally was in 1998. Yes, we've all heard it 100 times already, we get it, but it's true. And I didn't want to mod the PC version with the better DX mod to get it to play and look like it. I wanted all the gross shit with it too. And I thought, I might as well buy other Dreamcast games as well that I wanted, and this collection's still growing contrary to popular belief. I don't have infinite money to spend on old games around their same release price in 2022, especially in some of which I've already owned on other platforms. But after playing Sonic Adventure in the dark room on my CRT TV and being transported back to when I was 4 years old, waking up at 8 AM to turn on my GameCube and have my ears blow out with the speakers blasting a guitar riff from Open Your Heart, I kind of realized that I really liked this console. After beating it, I was kind of amazed that this game came out in 1998 and how well it felt to play, at least in comparison to the last time I tried to play the DX version on PC. It wasn't perfect, but it definitely made sense why people love this game so much. I still prefer Sonic Adventure 2, but that's besides the point. This game was really fun, and so is Crazy Taxi, and so is Space Channel 5, and so is Daytona, and Code Veronica, and now I have no money.
Subscribing to Snoozie is not covered by any North American health insurance. You may be liable with compensation if you experience hair loss, excessive hair growth, loss of hearing, loss of sight, vitiligo, nausea, vomiting, projectile vomiting, drowsiness, sudden pains in your right side abdomen, loss of taste, loss of feeling in your beak specifically, illusions of grandeur, hallucinations, numbness, impotence, that funny feeling when you hit your funny bone, explosive diarrhea, ascending interest in stealing from your grandmother's grave, and death. If you experience any of these symptoms, contact your doctor as soon as possible. You don't have much time left. Ask your doctor if Snoozie is for you.
So yeah, this console was a failure, but I really like it, and I really just want to talk about it. It's such an interesting piece of hardware. People always talk about the Dreamcast and how it failed because it failed hard, selling a measly 9 million units. Now let's compare that to the GameCube, the other console that was a failure this generation. Nearly 22 million. Look, obviously the GameCube didn't fail that hard. It was just a bit behind considering the N64 sold just under 33 million consoles. So if by Nintendo standards the GameCube was a failure, imagine being Sega a year into the Dreamcast lifecycle. The Sega staff were on suicide watch for 3 years and had to be stopped from jumping the moment the company lost a single yen. But they really tried to get the Dreamcast to be a success. Some of these attempts were crazy. In 2000, if you signed up for 2 years of SegaNet, they would give you a free Dreamcast with a keyboard, and if you already had a Dreamcast and you signed up for the internet, you get a keyboard and $200 to cover the cost of your Dreamcast. Sega was really pushing for you to have one of these things at any means necessary, and it still failed, and it's gotta make you wonder why. The console was good, it had good games, the controller is extremely sturdy, it had memory cards you can play mini games on, online multiplayer, downloadable DLC, a good lineup of launch games, and it had a lot of fantastic post-launch games, a lot of exclusives, groundbreaking graphics for the times, arcade accurate ports, and you can even browse the internet on this thing. Seriously, I'm asking you, if you're old enough to have been around when the Dreamcast was released, why the fuck did this fail? Seriously, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? This is without a doubt the most insane, forward-thinking, consumer-focused, ahead-of-its-time console I've ever seen, and it crashed and, in for lack of better words, blew up in Sega's face. What were you guys doing? I'm genuinely upset. You guys let this thing fail. Like, I don't get it. I really don't. Wait. What's that? The reason the Dreamcast failed. Yes, it's all right here. It's right in front of me now. Yeah, no, this wasn't why the Dreamcast failed. Look, piracy was a big factor in the Dreamcast's life cycle and identity, and the fact that it was so easy and accessible for the everyman to do made the Dreamcast, at least to some people, a no-brainer, because you buy the console and you can just get any game you want for free. Free. But if that was the case, more people would have bought the fucking Dreamcasts! No doubt this piracy problem took some sales out of Sega's pocket and the people who made the games. But oh my god, that's even more reason to buy the console. You can just steal on it and they couldn't do a damn thing. Why wouldn't you buy it? Now, I have some pirated games here. These are all games I own in some way or another, and if I can't own them, they're not accessible legally anywhere else on modern platforms. I also have a copy of Crazy Taxi here. I own a sealed copy and I need that for picking up chicks. Always keep a sealed copy of Crazy Taxi on Dreamcast with you. You never know when a hot babe might show up. There's really no effort into pirating these games. You just need a CD burner and some CD-ROM discs and, well, the pirated games. And they're definitely playable. Apparently playing pirated games isn't good for the disc reader, as the disc reader has to work more to read the disc, as official discs have the data laid out in a way where it can read faster, meaning less work for your console and faster loading times. So I don't really like using these and only have them for example purposes in this video. So with all this in mind, I don't really see how piracy would have been responsible for the failure of the Dreamcast. Any average consumer at the time wouldn't have known you can just pirate the video games, and the ones that did were probably not in a place to buy the games anyways. They probably had enough money to buy a rack of discs for cheap and already had a way to burn discs. And it's not like you can play these pirated discs on anything but a Dreamcast, so Sega would still have in some way benefited from this. But they didn't. And it's not like they didn't have games on launch either. A lot of these launch titles in North America are just boring sports games, but we got 3 very important games right here. One less important than the others, but still 3 very good games. Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, and Power Stone. I've never played Power Stone, but ask anyone who's played Power Stone. This is a damn fun game. We gotta focus on the main 2, Sonic Adventure and Soul Calibur. One redefined the generation, and the other brought arcade 3D graphics to the home console at a stable frame rate. Starting with Soul Calibur, this game is great. I originally started with Soul Calibur 2 when I was a kid on GameCube, so going back to this one, it surprisingly felt good. Usually when you go back to these older 3D fighters, even by one entry, they feel a lot worse or are just downright bad by today's standards, but no, Soul Calibur is still the foundation for what Soul Calibur feels like today, and it's honestly amazing. I'd totally play this today and learn it with a friend if I had any to play with. It has a great roster of characters, it feels really good to play, and it's still just really cool. I still personally think that the series came into its own with Soul Calibur 2, but this game is still so close to having everything I think of when I think about Soul Calibur. The music, the graphics, the aesthetic, it's all like 95% the way there. I'm just really impressed with this game personally, and it kinda sucks that no one talks about it the way we do Soul Calibur 2. But moving on, we had the landmark history-changing title that single-handedly is responsible for making me think that as a kid, that the type of shoe I wear is directly responsible for how fast I can run. My mom laughed at me then, but now my shoes glow, so fuck you, Mom, I can run fast as fucking these. Look, I'm just gonna run face first into this wall and say that yes, Sonic did have a rocky transition in 3D, but not in the way that everyone says, because everyone for some reason forgets that these fucking games exist. And this one's case never even came out. If you take these games into consideration, yeah, of course Sonic had a rough transition to 3D, but I'm not fucking stupid, and no one in their right mind is considering these games when talking about Sonic's transition into 3D. They're talking about this game, and they're fucking wrong. Sonic Adventure is still, 24 years later, a fantastic game. It holds up insanely well to modern standards, and I can't say that for a lot of games released in 1998. Sonic Adventure looks good, plays good, has great music, runs most of the time at a solid 30 FPS, great replayability, and Chow! Yes! Oh my god! I love Chow Gardens so much, guys. I want them back, Sega. I want them back, and if you don't put them in the next fucking Sonic game, I'm gonna fucking find you. And when I fucking get you, I am very normal for the small little animal babies. Most of my time was spent in Sonic Adventure 2's Chow Garden, but I spent a lot of time in the Chow Garden in DX as well, and it all started here, and I miss it. Sonic Adventure is just brimming with content. Not all of it is good, but most of the time, it is good to great, which is amazing for Sonic's honestly first true 3D outing. The amount of shit this game gets for the DX version is just absurd. Do I think it's the best game of all time? No, but I think it sure as hell is still a good game, shitty voice acting and all. And the Dreamcast doesn't just stop at a good launch, it honestly had some insanely good first-party and third-party support, which is more than we can say for a lot of Nintendo's consoles. If I'm being honest, looking at the other side, I'm in the camp that most Nintendo 64 games either suck or have aged poorly, and if they age well, they're still shaky in a lot of areas. But Dreamcast, if I'm being honest, only 2 years after Nintendo 64 release, feels like it's an entirely different ballgame. So almost every game on this console has aged pretty well. Capcom arcade-accurate ports of their fighting games, including the best way to play MVC2 outside of the delisted 7th gen ports, Resident Evil 2 and 3 ports with, at the time, Code Veronica being exclusive to the Dreamcast, Crazy Taxi 1 and 2, Samba de Amigo, Space Channel 5, Jet Set Radio, the first console port of Ikaruga, the House of the Dead games, Quake 3 Arena with mouse and keyboard support, Daytona USA, Dead or Alive 2, Seaman, Guilty Gear X, the King of Fighters games. I'm starting to realize that Dreamcast was just a fighting game console, Phantasy Star Online, and last but not least, Sega Dreamcast web browser. Oh yeah, this is great. There's a lot of games I could talk about like Shenmue, but sadly I haven't played Shenmue, and I'm still saving money for the copy of it I want to buy. But talking about the Dreamcast and not talking about how huge Shenmue was and how ahead of its time it was is a crime. I'm a big fan of the Yakuza series, and it's quite clear a lot of Yakuza stems from what Shenmue does. As time has gone on, this game has clearly aged, and not for the best, but it's still just like any landmark title, important to the history of games, even if all the games I listed here, including every fighting game arcade port, were the only games on the Dreamcast. That is still an insane lineup, at least for me. I love fighting games, and I think almost all of these games are must-plays because of their cultural significance, and yet most of them are still really only playable on Dreamcast, or on PC, and some not at all, and that's a damn shame if you ask me. A lot of these games are either stuck here or stuck on other platforms after they were ported, and some are just stuck here like this unreleased copy of Half-Life. A couple of years ago, an unfinished but very late build of the Half-Life build for Dreamcast was leaked online, and I'm pretty sure you can play through this game from start to finish without issues aside from frame rate problems and controls. Actually, never mind, in the opening area alone, every few feet you have to load the next part of the area, and it takes like a minute. This is unbearable. Obviously, Half-Life isn't a Dreamcast exclusive, and the PS2 had its own Half-Life port, so why am I acting as if it's stuck on the Dreamcast? Well, because things like this are always going to be stuck on this console, and that's what makes them even more interesting. I personally wouldn't play the game like this, even if you have a computer from 2000 to now. Half-Life is a way better experience on those computers, but if for some reason you really want to play Half-Life on a controller with very strong aim assist and bad controls, frame rate problems, and overall just a compromised experience, like, I guess you could play this? If this actually came out when it was supposed to, yeah, at the time this would have been a way to play Half-Life. But having a way back then would have been better than having no way to play it at all for most people. So the Dreamcast is the only console, at least that I know, because I didn't research it because it's funnier that way, that has an unreleased version of the original Half-Life available to play. I don't think the PS2 build leaked, but it would be interesting if it did, even though we already have an official release of it. And the only way you can play the Dreamcast version is either like an idiot and playing a Dreamcast port of a PC game on your PC emulating a Dreamcast instead of just playing the PC version, or obtaining it illegally and burning it onto a disc and using the Dreamcast like it was intended by bypassing copy protection or lack thereof and playing it on actual hardware. Horrible controls and frame rate included. The controller is mostly to blame for that. Honestly, I actually like the controller despite its problems. For some reason, the wire comes from the bottom and then is put back up through this notch, like they made this controller and then realized, oh fuck, this kind of sucks, quick, make a notch, to essentially put a band-aid on it. This was also before dual analog was standard, so this is also partially to blame as to why Half-Life controls suck so bad. You have to walk with the A, B, X, Y buttons, and honestly, these are my least favorite part of the controller. Nothing is wrong with pushing the buttons themselves, it's just this weird little bump they have on the buttons. They dig into my thumb and it starts to hurt pretty quickly if I'm not pressing these with the fleshy parts of my thumb, as opposed to what I like to do with around the joint of the thumb. You could always just, not do that. But that's how my fingers feel good on controllers, especially one as bulky as this one. Ironically enough, the analog stick feels almost brand new. Modern analog sticks and the competition at the time all use pretty much the same technology of potentiometers on an X and Y axis that are moved by the analog stick itself to send a signal of varying values. That's to keep it simple. In these analog sticks, they are all held together by physical parts. This means that they are especially susceptible to wear and tear over time. Every analog stick is eventually just going to be worn down over time. It's just something normal that happens with these analog sticks. But with these analog sticks, they function with magnets and springs, which means there's no constant grinding parts to wear down over time. Well, there is, but they don't wear down nearly as fast. It'd take a really long time for these analogs to break, and considering it's been 24 years and this controller still feels only normally used, I think it's doing pretty good. And we've been sitting on this technology for over 20 years now for no reason. Once again, the Dreamcast shows that it's ahead of the curve, and not only by one generation of consoles, but 3 of them. Hey, did you know you can still connect the Dreamcast online? That's right, you can. It's why this video partially took so long to get out, because I had to find a Raspberry Pi mini computer with the chip shortage, and buy a landline adapter from a dude off his website specifically meant for Dreamcast Online, and then all this to boot up Quake 3 just to have no one be online. Because fucking of course no one would be online. It's fucking Quake 3 Arena on Dreamcast on fan servers. I'm the only idiot dumb enough to be on this shit. Wait, what the fuck? Who the fuck is playing Quake 3 Arena on December 6th of 2022? It's a Tuesday afternoon. I played around with these two dudes and got my shit fragged. The controls are dog shit. The frame rate made me want to fucking puke and made me dizzy. I couldn't hit shit for the life of me. It was a fun time, and I'd never play this shit again. I can always find the people playing this game. It wouldn't be hard to try and contact them and ask them why they're playing this when Quake 3 Arena on PC can be picked up on sale for like $3 and has a 24-hour peak of nearly 30 people on Steam with a frame rate that's not garbage, and you don't need to buy a mouse and keyboard adapter if you want to play like that, because you're definitely not buying an actual Dreamcast keyboard and mouse. And it's definitely easier than buying a Raspberry Pi and loading a Dream Pi onto it and buying a phone line adapter for it to just set up and play probably the worst version of Quake 3 there is in 2022. But in all honesty, they'd probably give me some superficial answer like, I want a more authentic experience to my childhood, or that original 1999 experience or something. Not like there's anything wrong with that. I mean, who am I to judge considering I just did all that? But yeah, people still play this and other Dreamcast games online. Sometimes there's a dedicated fan base of weirdos just sitting around on their old ass console playing these games. If any of you weirdos are watching this video, I'm glad to be a part of your community. Please continue doing weird things. I like watching you like children watch fish in a fish tank swim back and forth like they'll ever achieve anything within the strict confines of the one box of water you'll be breathing for the rest of your life, occasionally swapped out for some slightly less dirty water. You can also download DLC for the Dreamcast. The same website, Dreamcast Live, here has an archive of most of the DLC here. Yes, the Dreamcast of all fucking consoles had downloadable content. Like this weird Christmas DLC for Sonic Adventure. When you stand near the tree, they start singing the song, and occasionally Sonic will tell you to fucking move it. That I've been waiting for, and I hope you're looking for someone. Better get going. Happy Christmas, Sonic. Hope you like nuclear warheads. I'd show you some more internet browsing, but considering how far the internet has progressed in the past 24 years, most websites are completely inaccessible, so I can really only show the website that has archived the DLCs. And there was a lot of DLC for the Dreamcast, at least a lot more than you'd think for a platform from this time period, which is really funny because most DLC takes up like a fifth of your memory card. If you didn't have multiple VMUs, you probably had no space for DLC, even if you had like a normal amount of games. And even if you did, have fun downloading these. Downloading one of these DLCs on 1998 internet would accrue you a $400 internet bill or some shit. Entering the 90s was rough. You'd look at a 32 by 32 picture of a dog, and your ISP would fine you $80 and slap on the ass for even daring to connect to the internet that day. But the Dreamcast also had online play, so you can play some of these games online if you were a rich middle-class white family, because who else owned the Dreamcast and a dial-up connection in 1999? A better question was, who owned a Dreamcast, but I'm trying to be specific here because I don't think I've ever heard of someone past 2005 playing the Dreamcast online titles. Do you know someone who played Phantasy Star Online back near release? I sure as hell don't, but if you question me on if I have any friends, the answer would be the same, so I don't think that using my sample size is exactly credible. So, why did this thing fail? I don't know. I've always wondered that myself. Sega was definitely on decline after the Genesis, and I couldn't tell you I know a person who has owned the Sega Saturn or any games that were on it. Considering that the console was also a failure and that the Dreamcast only sold 0.13 million less according to Wikipedia, I don't think that the Dreamcast failure is any fault of its own, and more so just Sega not going into the console market the past few years in the best way. They were constantly releasing add-ons to the Genesis, and I think at least the public saw the Saturn as just another add-on, or at least a redundant upgrade considering the Sega CD add-on existed as well. And well, no one wanted that either. If you wanted a 3D gaming console around this time, you almost certainly had a PlayStation. And we all know Nintendo fans only play on Nintendo, so they were riding or dying until 1996 for the Nintendo 64 release. And the overlap of people who owned both consoles was pretty slim by the time the Sega Dreamcast came out, and Sega pretty much killed all hype they had with the Genesis. That's what I think, at least. Like seriously, when I think of Sega consoles, I think Sega Genesis, some middle console I forget the name of, Sega Dreamcast. Because the Saturn genuinely somehow had even less cultural significance than the Dreamcast. Probably because it wasn't all too impressive and its younger brother was shot and killed in New Mexico before it could ever grow up. I like the Dreamcast. I like it a lot. I think it gets a bad rap. I think the Dreamcast deserved better. I think we all would have done better if the Dreamcast survived that day, March 31st of 2001. Sadly, it didn't, though. It was never truly given a proper chance at life. A proper chance to compete against the other consoles. And for that, I think we all lost that day. Not just Sega. Merry Christmas, Sonic. Merry Christmas.